Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation? Welcome to another episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast. Here with your host, Matt Lonsberry, and my co-host, Aiden McCrone. Aiden, we just talked about it briefly before going live here. Another disappointing outcome for Michigan State basketball as they fall to Indiana on the road 65-64 to finish the regular season. Michigan State loses 4 out of their last 5 to end the regular season and kind of stumbles their way now into tournament play. It doesn't seem that long ago, Aiden, that we were talking about this team perhaps working their way up to like a 4 seed and getting a double bye in the Big Ten tournament. And now about the exact opposite happened down the stretch here, and Michigan State winds up as the 8 seed in the tournament. And will play Ohio State in the second round of the tournament. They get a first round bye. And Ohio State all of a sudden is like the hottest team in the Big Ten outside of maybe Purdue. So, that's kind of the situation. We're going to react and talk about the game here a little bit, and then the Spartans kind of projection for March. And with that, we'll kind of just get into it. Michigan State got off to an awful start tonight. I think they started the game 3 of 20 from the field, fell behind 20-5, 24-7, big 17-point deficit early in this game. Did claw their way back out of it, got going there. Tyson Walker got going at the end of the second half and was phenomenal, especially at the start of the second half. Some good moments from AJ Hogard. Malik Hall, I thought, finished well in the first half. But didn't do a whole lot in the second half, scoring-wise. Jaden Akins had a little bit of a spurt there to start the second half, but mostly a non-factor in this game again. Just your reaction to the game, Aiden, as it stumbles to another disappointing defeat.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way I could describe it is this game was really the epitome of the season, kind of bundled all into one with everything that came with it. The comeback, being down big, and then they actually capitalized on it, took the lead, and then they couldn't maintain the lead, and they had an opportunity to break it open and kind of, run away with it in the second half. Once Walker got hot, and then they didn't, and Indiana came back, and then we really saw, the struggles that we've been seeing all year with, the bigs and the rebounding and just the defense in general. And we saw some sloppy play by Akins and Hogard at the end of the second half as well. And I think, the streaky shooting, obviously going down 24-7 to begin with, and then Walker gets hot and Akins makes a couple shots, and you're like, okay, now they're, getting in the groove of it. And then the second half start off strong, and then at the end it's back to that streaky shooting. And I think a lot of people will look back at that last play and kind of talk about how it really didn't feel like a play at all. It was just kind of like an isolation for Walker. But I'm not gonna even talk. I mean, I'll say that, but I'm not gonna say that was the end of the game or that was, the deciding factor, because there were a lot of other deciding factors. Getting off to a super slow start had, everything to do with that, and they wouldn't have been in that situation if they, didn't start down, 17 points in the first half. So that hurts a lot. I mean, just overall, just the season in general.
Yeah.
The bigs, I think everyone knew coming into the season that was going to be the biggest question mark, but I think we haven't really seen the improvement that we hope for from the guards, specifically of Hogard and Akins. I think, we've seen glimpses of it almost every week, where we see glimpses of, 5-minute spurts of Akins, where it's like, hey, okay, he went and tested the NBA waters for a reason. And then the last 3 games, I know we weren't on here to talk about the Purdue or the Northwestern game, but he really struggled against Northwestern. He didn't even score. And then I think he had 11 against Purdue, but it was not a very efficient 11. And Hogard, again, like you alluded to, we saw today where there were glimpses of, hey, he's one of the best point guards that's come through Michigan State, and then there's a lot more of what is he even doing? Like,
Yeah,
we have no clue. So
the up and down. Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that today was kind of the epitome of how this whole season has gone. And yeah, and now you're fighting for your tournament chances, and really nothing's guaranteed. And they kind of should have played like nothing was guaranteed for the past couple weeks, but it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, no, it was just a mixed bag of, well, I mean, not even really a mixed bag. Tyson was really good. AJ, I thought, had one of his better games. If you look at the box score and things like that, one of his better games of the last month or so, really since that Illinois game, or that second half against Iowa. But yeah, those two guys didn't get help from hardly anybody else. I put it in my quick little recap story up on our website. Outside of Walker and Hogard, the rest of Michigan State's roster was 10 for 35 from the floor. That's 28.6%, and 2 of 14 from three. That's 14.3%. Both of those 2 threes outside of Walker and Hogard did come from Akins early in that second half, but that was like it for him. Just that quick little spurt. And yeah, I mean, you can't place the disappointment of this season on any one individual. But like, is it fair to me, like, Akins has regressed from last year. Certainly with the shooting numbers, that you can just look at his box scores and see that his shooting has regressed. But he's regressed in the shooting, but he did not take a step in the half court offense at all. I wrote this in my post game piece as well, is that unless Akins is out on the fast break, he doesn't get to the rim. There was a time in this game where he tried to make a move and get to the rim, kind of got ahead of himself, stumbled, traveled, had a turnover there. He had 2 really bad other turnovers, one right at the half court line. There was another one, I think, in the half court as well. So just he's really in a funk right now, and it's hard to imagine him getting right. Maybe with these 4 days off or 5 days off or whatever it is going into Big Ten play, but like, that hasn't been in something that's kind of jolted him in the past. He had a couple games stretch there where he shot the ball better, but for the most part has just been ineffective in the half court. Michigan State's bigs, and as you said, we kind of knew going into the season that this was going to be a big question mark. Going into this game, we knew that Indiana had a huge advantage in the front court, and that played out completely in this one as well. Kalel Ware scores 28 points. He shoots like 60-something% from the floor, 12 rebounds, just was a man among boys in this game. And he's the transfer from Oregon. So this is another transfer big who Michigan State has played against, who has a big game. And again, it brings up those same similar questions of, Tom Izzo's unwillingness to go into the transfer portal and grab a big. Imagine if that guy's playing on this Michigan State team with these guards. Like, how much does that change? Things like that. And it's just another example of somebody else going out and getting a big who can play, and it just it puts a glaring microscope on Izzo's unwillingness to do that this offseason. We've talked about some of the reasons maybe why Jackson Kohler's injury, Xavier Booker being a 5-star coming in. He was kind of out of his depth, I think, in this game. Was good. I was glad to see him get the start again. But then quickly realized he was overmatched in the post and wasn't given much of an opportunity after that. So yeah, just a lot of issues. And now we're going to tournament time with a whole lot more questions than answers. Any other thoughts on the game from today, though?
Yeah, I think the Kalel Ware being a transfer definitely adds insult to injury for MSU, because he isn't the only transfer big that they've faced this year that has given them issues either. So just, with that said, I thought, once MSU kind of took the lead in the second half and Walker got hot, it was kind of like, okay, he got his double of, 26 points in the first half and whatever, 11 rebounds. And I was like, okay, MSU is still the better team. And then, they choke it at the end. So I think just right now, MSU we'll talk about kind of where they are in the tournament, but right now, that Ohio State game is the biggest game of the year right now, especially with this loss. And I said kind of before this game that they would need, even after a loss to Purdue, they did beat Northwestern. I still thought that Indiana and the first Big Ten tournament game were must win to stay in and really just solidify yourself in the tournament to punch your ticket. And now I think, we'll talk about this, but I think it's really on the bubble, and I really am not that confident that it's in their hands. I still think they can and they will make the tournament, but I don't think that it's completely in their control.
Yeah, so a couple things I want to react to. Number one is Jason's comment here. Yeah, I'm not certainly not saying that the issues of the post were on Booker. Kohler and Cooper also struggled mightily defensively. Cooper brought a little bit more on the glass. I think he had 7 rebounds. Kohler was getting killed on the glass today. When he's limited athletically, and so going up and getting those boards was getting out muscled for those boards as well. So certainly it was a complete failure at the 5 spot throughout the game. Sissoko got in there a little bit, didn't do a whole lot, picked up a couple fouls, I think. Just a total failure at the center spot once again. Coach Izzo talked about, like, this week kind of going into this game. He referred to the Michigan State's limitations at center and said, the guards have to play better. If the guards are playing well, then the issues at center are kind of diminished a little bit, or don't take up as many headlines. Maybe that's true, but like when Akins is struggling to shoot the ball as much as he is, Tyson had a nice bounce back game today after really struggling with his efficiency. Like he put points on the board, but struggled with his efficiency in the last 4 or 5. Leading into this one was much better today. Hogar, we talked about his up and downs, but the fact of the matter is the backcourt hasn't been as good as we anticipated them being, and that has only amplified the fact that Michigan State doesn't have a center presence to throw the ball to. A tough matchup for Malik Hall, I think, tonight as well, just again because of the size of Indiana and their physicality. He struggled. He had 7 rebounds, but was held to 8 or 9 points. I got it here, but not very efficient from Hall. 7 points, 3 of 12. So not a great game from him. I'm not going to put too much on Malik Hall though, because he's been Michigan State's most consistent player over the last several months. Just a bad outing for him tonight. So a lot of question marks. We're getting some comments about the NCAA tournament. You touched on it, Aiden, a little bit too, and so I'm going to kind of share my thoughts on that right here. With Michigan State, even after losing to Iowa and Ohio State, they were still at a 9 seed. They lose to Purdue. They're still at the 9 seed. Then they get that win over Northwestern, which is a bit of a boost as far as resume. I just don't think they're going to fall far enough. Even if they lose to Ohio State in the tournament, I just don't think they're going to fall that many spots to be out of the tournament. Whether you think they should be in or deserve to be in, that's a different discussion. But I just think based on the projections that we've seen, these bracketologists, this is what they do. So they're usually pretty accurate. Certainly when it comes to like teams getting in or out, or teams that aren't in their, first 4 out or next 4 out or last 4 in, that type of thing, last 4 buys, like Michigan State's not even in one of those last 4 buys spot right now, at least the recent projections. So, I do agree with you. Like it's not in their hands anymore. Like it certainly isn't in the committee's hands. They haven't solidified their spot. But I do think that win over Northwestern, at least it's halts like a complete free fall out of the tournament field. Just because of the resume, the win over Indiana State. I know they lost in their championship final today. But they've got enough of the resume. And then for whatever reason, I don't understand it completely, but the metrics really like Michigan State for some reason. Like they're in the top 25 of the net. There's other ones, Ken Pom. I haven't really looked at Ken Pom recently, but like the metrics for whatever it's worth really likes this team for some reason based on their record, better than what their record would suggest. And so that might carry the day on Selection Sunday. Now, looking forward to the Big Ten tournament, Ohio State is the first on the docket. You win that, I think you got to go play Purdue again. So that's tough. I will say, Michigan State did battle and played well. It's fair to say they played pretty well in West Lafayette, I thought. It's just Zach Edey is a monster, and Michigan State doesn't have the bodies to be able to match him. I think we'll see how that one goes. Like, certainly not expecting a win in that. You got to deal with Ohio State first, who, as we said, is the hottest team probably in the Big Ten right now. Beat Purdue a couple weeks ago. So looking ahead now to the Big Ten tournament, Aiden, what can we expect? What do you hope to see at least?
Yeah, I mean, Indiana, I just looked it up. So the net rankings has Indiana, a quad 2 team. So that would be considered a quad 2 a loss because they are outside the top 75. Okay. So, So yeah, I think in the Big Ten tournament, Ohio State is a must. I got the hiccups. I don't know why.
Got the hiccups.
But yeah, Ohio State is a must-win game, especially with the Indiana loss. And then Purdue. I mean, if they played Purdue as hard as they played them in Mackey, I think that's definitely a competitive game. And yeah, something. And if they get out to a hot start like they did at Purdue and not like a slow start that they had today, I think it gives them a good chance to get in. I think a win against Purdue would definitely solidify them into the tournament. And then, but I think a loss against Ohio State, and like you said, even though they're a hot team, I think a loss could put them even more on the bubble or see them in the first four, like they kind of have been declining and are leaning towards that way.
Yeah, it might come down to whether the committee more so looks at like the metrics and all that stuff, or if they just look at this last recent stretch and it's like, oh man, Michigan State's really struggled down the stretch, and so that might bump them down a few spots. Yeah, it's just not a good situation. Not a situation where it ought to be where you're leaving your fate into the committee's hands. I will say, if you fall off of that 9 seed, you do get the benefit of maybe not having to face a 1 seed in the second round. But that's putting the cart way before the horse here, because Michigan State has to get out of the first round, and with as inconsistent as this team is, that really could come down to the matchup that they get in that first round. Could be a bad matchup. Do you think Indiana was a bad matchup for Michigan State just because of their size and physicality in the post, as opposed to Michigan State's obvious weakness, Indiana's guards against Michigan State's guards? Do you think it was a bad matchup?
I don't know, because I feel like that Indiana is a very prototypical Big Ten team. Considering Purdue with Edey and their guards, and like Indiana does with, like, similar to Purdue, their guards really just play off of Khalil Ware. So I don't think it was a bad matchup per se. I think the fact that he kind of had Ware had a career day doesn't help the situation.
Sure.
But I think it's more disappointing how the guards have really just struggled this year. And it's with shooting. I think part of it has to do with chemistry between the guards and chemistry between the bigs. And there were a lot of unforced turnovers today too that, MSU has been historically known for, but this specific team has not been a team to make unforced turnovers. And, that's really what's kept them in a lot of games, is the fact that they have handled the ball well and they just couldn't make shots. But now, we're starting to see a little bit more turnovers, which, is hurting this team even more because they are struggling to shoot. They are struggling to rebound. They are struggling defensively. So, there's that the second half, there was a pass from, I think it was Hogarth to Holloman that just went straight out of bounds. And Izzo just put his hands up and put his hands in front of his face. And it's like, well, that's just kind of the day that's been going right now. So
yeah,
I think that's really got to hurt. That's really got to get cleaned up before their game on, what would it be, Wednesday or Thursday? I think it's Thursday.
I think it's Thursday.
Yeah. So I mean, if they can clean up, that by Thursday, I think Ohio State, we saw Xavier Booker come out against Ohio State and played really well.
Yeah.
I think, we saw MSU in the first half of that game play really well. And, now it's just kind of get the redemption from that game, because that game has to leave a bad taste in their mouth. And they,
For sure.
I'd be shocked if they didn't want to get that one back. And now they got it back, and have a chance to redeem themselves and kind of get back on the right foot. And, a loss to Purdue is nothing to be ashamed of, but I think a loss to Ohio State is really shaky. And I just kind of want to go to Chris's comment about the Red Wings when they only cared about the playoff streak. And I think, I don't know if we mentioned this or it was a different MSU podcast that mentioned that kind of parallel between MSU's current tournament streak and the Red Wings streak. And, we've had the conversation of, does it do this team any good to leave them out of the NCAA tournament long term? And it's really hard. I think they deserve a chance. I think they've played well. I know, Clark Kellogg talked on the halftime show that, hey, if they lose this game, they'd have the same record as Indiana, but they played a way tougher schedule. But this team has played a lot of really tough teams, but they haven't won any of those big games outside of Baylor and Illinois. I think that's something that, again, like we've talked about with the analytics and stuff, the analytics really like this team because of the strength of schedule. But I think just looking at the eye test, this team has been close every year, or kind of every game, and they seem to play to their level of competition, because we've seen what they've done against Baylor, against Illinois. We've seen like how well they competed against Purdue, and then they play the level of competition against Ohio State. They play, today is the perfect example again of, this is not the highest level that they could be playing at, and that really just hurts them right now. And instead of being, like we said, a top 4 team in the Big Ten with a double bye, playing to their level of competition has now got them the 9 seed. And instead of playing, their first game on Friday, they're playing on Thursday. And instead of, having that double bye, and if they win that, they might draw, Wisconsin or Illinois instead. Now they're drawing Purdue.
Yeah. I wanted to get to Steve's comment. He's talked quite a bit about the Michigan State's offense in the comment section here. It does seem like unless Michigan State gets an open look early in the shot clock off of some kind of action where they get one of their shooters open, it kind of devolves into give the ball to Tyson and let him try to do something. And if that doesn't work, then the offense is in trouble. And then today it worked for stretches. And Tyson was effective, but that's not sustainable. You can't play that way. Tyson is going to get everybody's attention Especially when it goes into tournament play, because it's do or die. And so of course you're gonna key on the leading scorer, and hey, anybody beat us but him. And so it's gonna be difficult. Last year you had a Joey Hauser who could step out and knock down a shot. Last year's team, I am surprised to be saying this now with the regular season finished, but last year's team was better than this team. I just pulled up the record. Michigan State was 21-13 last year, 11-8 in conference play. They're 10-8 or 10-10 in conference play this year, and they've got 18 wins and is it 14 losses now for Michigan
13,
18-13.
Yep.
So yeah, it's wild. I was thinking back to like last year, and Michigan State gets to the Sweet 16 last year and has that classic game against Kansas State, losing overtime. But is that kind of run in the cards here? I don't know, man. It's been so inconsistent. I just don't see it. I don't see it. Like, they can prove me wrong, but I don't see it based on what we've just watched all season long. And why I think, in addition to looking in the transfer portal for a post, Izzo's really got to look at what Michigan State does offensively and try to figure some things out, because it's been really stagnant, not only over these last 4 years, but even going back. Cassius Winston made up for a lot of deficiencies with the half court sets as well. He was just so good, and then he had Xavier Tillman as well. He was so good that he covered up some of those deficiencies. He was the guy who the ball would end up in his hands with 10 seconds on the shot clock, and he would create something. And so there's got to be an easier way to play. You think about some of the offensive coaches around the country. Not that like Michigan State wants like a Fran McCaffrey or something like that, like, because that's a total different type of style of play. But somebody like is there an assistant coach out there who is good with the X's and O's on the offensive end that you can bring in and add to your staff? We've talked about that a little bit this year too. Is like Izzo needs to look at his staff and find out which of these guys are worth keeping around and which ones need to be given a pink slip. Like there needs to be change, because the standard is too high at this program. This is 4 years in a row now where Michigan State has been right in the middle of the Big Ten, and the Big Ten, it's still a tough league. It's still a gritty league, but like, I feel like it's just because most teams have just kind of taken a step down. And so as overall, the league is worse than it used to be. It's just that it's still very competitive. It's just it's not at the top of college basketball like it was, 4 or 5, or probably more like 5 or 6 years ago now. There was a stretch where Michigan was really good, and Michigan State was a top 10 team. Purdue has always been up there. It seems like Wisconsin, pretty good team this year, but not quite at the level that they were with like Frank Kaminsky and some of those guys, Ethan Happ. So the fact that Michigan State is in the middle of this, I would say weakened Big Ten, is even more alarming and concerning. So you've got to self-reflect, and Izzo's been around for almost 30 years, and maybe it's tough for veteran coaches to self-reflect this far into their career. But it's got to happen, or he's got to be starting to think about how much longer he wants to do this. Like, I'm not trying to push Izzo out the door. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying, like, you've got to adjust, or you've got to move on. That's kind of your two options here.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, Izzo has voiced his concern about kind of the trajectory of college basketball as a whole. And, this is an adapt or die kind of business. So you have to, adapt with the times and get one of those transfer players, those portal centers. And, he mentioned, he goes, this might come back to bite me. And it really has. And, the whole Booker situation, he talks about finding the right matchup, and, it's not, I don't think he gets the benefit of the doubt, honestly, to say that and say, oh, I have to find the right matchup. I think you know what's going to happen with the Big Ten. I mean, he's coached in the Big Ten for, 27, 28 years. So he's got to know that, it's going to be physical. And the way that the Big Ten is moving is, it's always been, it's been physical. It's had, some really good centers, and he's got to know that coming in, and when he's recruiting guys and when he's grabbing guys out of the portal, he's got to find players that, can match up against any type of style. And when you talked about the Cassius and Tillman year, I think that that's really important about what Tillman brought to the table more than anything was he was so complimentary to Cassius. And I think that's the problem that they have is they don't need some guy to come in and be, an NBA level center. They just need somebody to complement, their guard. They needed a center that can complement Walker, and that's what they don't have right now. And I think, chemistry wise, whether it's, scheme or X's and O's, whatever it may be, they don't have it. And I think that's really what's hurting them more than anything. And yeah, I think, it's just hard. It's just hard to look back at the last 4 years and give this team and this program the benefit of doubt of anything, because they've really struggled this whole time. And I think last season's team, you kind of knew what you were going to get. They were a good shooting team, but they didn't shoot a lot. They didn't, they shot a high percentage, but they didn't have a high volume rate of shooting. And I think this year's team is it's besides Malik Hall's kind of last 2-3 months that's been consistent. The rest of the players have really been inconsistent and very up and down with it. And you never know what you're going to get on any given night from this team. And I think that's the difference between this year and the last 3 years. But obviously it's clearly on the decline. And I think, from what I've heard, the assistant coaches, fought, tooth and nail to get Tyson Walker, out of the transfer portal. And that was a massive struggle. And, trying to think about it 3 years, ahead, what this team would be like if they didn't have Tyson Walker and it was, Hogard and Akins running it with, Holloman, and maybe they had another recruit, but that recruit would have been, a sophomore right now. So I think it's just a real struggle, and they have to use the portal. I think, this season's not even over, but it does feel in a way like they've kind of hit their peak right now, or they hit their peak already this season. And a run could still happen. And I think a lot of people, myself included, if a run happened, I think I wouldn't be super surprised by it. But I also think at the same time, it's very unlikely. And I think from what everyone has experienced watching this team the whole year, I don't think it would be as enjoyable as previous Final Four runs in past years.
I mean, if you get to the Final Four, like I feel like you're still gonna enjoy it. But like I'll put myself out there a little bit, and I would be surprised at this point if a run happens. So that's just my own opinion. But going back to your point about like I wrote a piece that it came up in my Facebook memories like a couple days ago, and it was about Michigan State's lack of players who made that season's like all Big Ten teams. And that's kind of another thing that's jumped out at me throughout these 4 years. Now we'll see what happens with the all Big Ten this year. I think Tyson Walker will be a first teamer. At worst, he's a second teamer, but I think he's probably going to be a first team guy this year. If you look at his full body of work, Malik Hall has probably played himself to a minimum of a third team guy. I think he could flirt with the second team, but we'll see. There's a lot of depth in the post in the front court in the Big Ten, so we'll see if he cracks the second team. So you've got those two guys, but like Hogar I don't think he's an honorable mention, but like he's not an all Big Ten caliber player this year. It hasn't been. Akins hasn't been close. and that's it. Like that's it
Yeah.
for this team. And so like that gap is alarming to me. Now, granted, Izzo brought in this class this last year with Booker and Carr and Fears. Fears got hurt, and didn't get hurt. He got shot. Was a victim of gun violence, over Christmas break, and so his season was cut short. So, and we'll see what happens with Garrick Norman next year. Comes with the reputation of being a good shooter. Michigan State needs one. Next year's class is pretty high up there in the rankings as well. So like the recruiting has seen a bit of a has been rejuvenated a little bit. And so maybe we've got to give that time to get in the system and see what that happens. But just the contrast between Michigan State and a Purdue or Wisconsin or Illinois now going forward with that talent that they put into those all Big Ten teams, I think that's been kind of a striking development, because Michigan State always had guys that were in the top of that list challenging for first or second team all Big Ten, and right now they're just not, and that's a huge problem.
Yeah, it's really huge, and I think, I mean, we've talked about the lack of consistency, and I think Hogard playing his best ball of the year, I think, was easily an all Big Ten player, and when Walker's playing his best ball, he's easily an All-American, you could argue, but the lack of consistency has really hurt them, and finding that front court has really just, I mean, it's just been a struggle. I feel like a broken record talking about this kind of, every other week this whole season, where it's like 1 week we see a really good team, another week, we get results like this. So yeah, I mean, I think it comes to development. I'm not going to put it all on Izzo. I do think he needs to make changes. I don't know where that is. That's above my pay grade, but it does seem that the changes that need to be made, I think their biggest thing was the player leadership. I think the player leadership was not the greatest that it's been in the past couple years. I think another thing is just, the development of the front court. I think, when Dwayne Stevens was a coach on staff, I think that the front court was always solidified, safe, secure, not an issue. And a lot of it was kind of built off of who their star player was. And, we saw Cassius Winston and you can even go back to players like Denzel Valentine and Kalen Lucas of, they found a level of creativity once they got older that they were able to create their own shot and, have players complement them and play off of each other. And, I think Tyson has tried to find that level of creativity, but like I said, I think the complementary players have really struggled this year, and it's been hard to watch the front court, and I don't think there is much to blame compared to the guards, because I think the guards have not developed and improved. I think Tyson had a good offseason where he became more consistent, but I don't think they had the overall offseason as a team. And in season, the in-season development has not grown either, because it does feel like, looking from game one of the James Madison game, or even, first 5 games in general versus the last 5 games, not much has improved, because the first 5 games were, a loss to James Madison. They beat, I think, Southern Indiana. They lost to Duke, lost to Arizona, and they might have beat, I think Butler was another game that they won their first 5 games. And then their last 5 games are a loss to Indiana, a win against Northwestern, a loss to Purdue, a loss to Ohio State, and can't remember the other one, but they've lost 4. Yeah. So losing 4 out of 5. So, so there's a lot to reference there. And I think, eye test statistic. I mean, again, advanced analytics likes them, but I think statistically, obviously the shooting has struggled, the rebounding, they seem to get out rebounded every game. So yeah, the growth from game 1 to game 31 has not been really anything at all.
Yeah, and continuing that point, like just looking at like an individual basis, like Cohen Carr's not even part of the rotation anymore. Like that's like he played what 4, maybe 5 minutes tonight, and that's kind of been his minute limit over these last several weeks or couple weeks has been 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 6 or 7. Booker got a couple opportunities there, played well, but in those opportunities, but again tonight. It was like they threw him in the starting lineup and then saw what that looked like, and they were like, nope, not doing that. So they put him on the bench, and he sits after just playing 7 minutes tonight. I don't have a huge issue with him not playing a whole lot tonight, just because he looked. I don't know if it was just being back in his home state playing against the Hoosiers, but he kind of looked rattled even early on. Misses a 3 badly. I don't know if it got tipped or not, but comes up short. The physicality, again, we talked about that at the start of the show tonight, so we won't rehash it here. But going back to your point, like these were high level recruits, and Booker as a 5-star, I think him being a 5-star, I think is more based on his potential than what he was coming in as a ready-made college player. I think most people agree on that, and so. The book isn't written yet on him, not to, no pun intended there, but like, but with Cohen just being really relegated to a very, very small role after some of the things we saw from him this season, I think I have to believe his lack of shooting definitely keeps him off the floor. And I think he struggles still defensively, which is knowing where he's supposed to be and his positioning and things like that. I think that's what's keeping him off the floor. But I would counter that with saying, yeah, he might not be a shooter, but guess what? Like Akins is shooting though right now, but he's not a very good shooter either. So, but he, so it's tough. I just can't imagine going into tournament play and Izzo's just going to like throw something else out there and try something new at this point. I think he has tried a few different things this year, but like I think they're going to roll with a lot of the similar lineups, at least as what they've played for the majority of the year here, and they're kind of just at this point crossing their fingers and hope that Akins can break out of his shooting slump and that Tyson can carry this performance and do, like, he's not going to score 30 per game in the tournament or anything like that, but like at least be efficient going forward. It's not a lot to hang your hat on though.
No, it's not. And I think Hogard is another concern, because I do think he defensively, I thought, at the start of the season, I thought he was a solid defensive player, and now he's struggled defensively. I think there are players that athletically have caught up to him, and all these guys that we're talking about are upperclassmen too, and the history of Izzo and MSU as a whole is, these guys, once they're in year 3 and year 4, have been fully developed and are ready, and they've been in these situations enough times that they're comfortable, and they still do not look comfortable in these situations, and kind of been in these positions of, hey, we're down 7, we got to come back, this is what we got to do to string a comeback. And I saw it in the start of the second half, where it's like, okay, they got into the right sets, they called some really good plays to get Walker open, and then Walker created his own. He had that really miraculous layup to help them get up to take the lead. And so but at the same time, they just don't look comfortable in these situations that they've been in countless times. And it's almost like they're not learning from the mistakes that they've made, because they've made plenty of them, not only this year, but the last 3 years. And I think that's really hurt them as well. And, I think, I see in the comments about other guards and other players that MSU could have recruited or did recruit, but not hard enough. And and what missing the tournament would be. But I think this team, I think that the seniors, the legacy of these seniors, that we've always heard about, that if you stay 4 years for Izzo, you will make a Final Four, you will go get to experience that. And now we are almost at year, and now it's the 2018-19 season was the last year that they made a Final Four, so it's almost 5 years out of making a Final Four. So there's a third senior class ready to or there's a second senior class about to miss a Final Four. And if things don't get better, I think if there's no portal or anything, you could see that streak being extended. So yeah, I think the guard play, like I've said, I think that's been the biggest letdown just the whole season because of the expectation. I don't think expectations were super high for the front court, but I think the back court, the high expectations that have let down have really hurt them more than anything.
Yeah, I want to pull up Chris's comment here and more so on the work ethic maybe, or the grittiness or the toughness. You mentioned like Kalen Lucas earlier, and you think back to like Draymond and or Adrian Payne. Yeah, those guys were good players, but there was also this like intense desire to win, and like there was like this competitiveness that was hard for anybody to match, and that's really been lacking. It seems like in recent years as well. I think I do see that out of Tyson. I think he gets a look in his eye, and he does have that, which is ironic because he's one of the transfers, or maybe the only transfer on this team.
Yeah.
But one of my issues with AJ is he kind of he flexes and he kind of acts tough like after he makes a play, but like that's not true toughness. That's not true caring or intensity. That's just reacting to something that went well. Like true grit is when things are off the rails and you get in your teammate's face, and not just like screaming and hollering, but also like grabbing them by their overalls and carrying them to get things right. Now I will say we saw a little bit of that today with the way Michigan State picked up its intensity on defense, forced a bunch of turnovers down the stretch in the first half, got Indiana totally out of rhythm there, carried that into the second half. So again, this has been another theme of this scene. Is we've seen glimpses of the old MSU, but there's been no consistency with it. I don't know, like that's not something that can be taught. It really that's not a I don't think that's a coachable skill. I think some guys just have that competitiveness and drive in them, and some guys just frankly don't. And I'm not going to point out individuals. I did call out AJ a little bit, but again, he's a senior. He's 23 years old. I think he can handle it. He's he's not a young pup anymore. But like that's been something that's just been missing, I feel like, with this program for a while now, and that's another alarming thing, because we always associated Tom Izzo coach teams with having that kind of mindset. Like if you're going to beat them, it's going to be a dogfight tooth and nail in order to beat these teams, and that's been lacking.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, even a player like Aaron Henry, I think you looked at I see a lot of things on Twitter of Aaron Henry post-game interviews during the COVID season, which, was a season that was worse than this, in record wise. And, every post-game loss, he talked about how, he's doing what he can for the team to win. And all he talked about ever was, the team and how much he wanted to win more than anything else. And I think that year specifically, they didn't really have the dogs or enough kind of firepower to really carry them, because he seemed like the only upperclassman. Joey Hauser, that was his first year playing in 2 years, and they lost a lot of veteran players. So I think that's a different situation. But this situation, again, like I said, it's a lot of upperclassmen that have been in these similar situations. And I do see it with, like you said, I do see it with Tyson, kind of that will to win. But a lot of these other guys, I think, their leadership, a lot of these guys try to lead by example and not really vocal. I don't think there's a lot of super vocal guys like a Draymond Green who's, gonna say it like it is, and he's gonna be loud at, every second of the day. That I don't see that with this team. I think there are a lot of, guys who are kind of, hold their own, and they try to lead by example. I think Tyson's a guy who leads by example, but isn't super vocal. So when you have those type of players and they start struggling and, they're not really vocal, the confidence, the kind of the pushing each other to be better, it looks different. I'm not saying it can't happen. It definitely can, but it just looks different from a lot of the other past Izzo teams.
For sure. I don't have much more to add, Aiden. I think we covered a lot of the bases. We talked about the game. We talked about, Big Ten tournament, NCAA projections. Kind of a somber note to wrap things up here. I will say I want to give a shout out. We weren't able to do a show last week due to various reasons, schedule wise. But Michigan State, hockey, want to give them a shout out, winning the regular season Big Ten championship, first Big Ten championship in program history, first conference championship since 2001. They'll be in action. I don't know. Did Wisconsin win today? Do you know by any chance? Because
I'm not sure.
I'm going to pull it up right now, because if Wisconsin won, then Michigan State will play Michigan in the second round of the Big Ten tournament. And if maybe somebody in the comments knows.
Someone just said they play Michigan. So
okay, so Wisconsin won today, beat Ohio State, and so Michigan State will play Michigan in the second round of the Big Ten tournament. Hey, there's a team that can make a run. There's a team who has got Frozen Four potential. So we've tried to mix in a little bit of hockey coverage on our website a little bit this year. We're a limited staff, so there's only so much we can do. But we might give them a whole lot more attention in the weeks to come, based on or just depending on what happens with the basketball team. So I wanted to give them a shout out. Michigan State women's gymnastics won the Big Ten championship, and so they'll move into the NCAAs too. We'll keep a little bit of an eye on that as well. Just I like to give out some of these shout outs to these other programs that don't get as much attention. And Aiden, we are 9 days away from the start of spring football, so we'll have plenty more to talk about going forward.
Yeah. I will say that the women's team did lose in the Big Ten tournament, but they are they do seem like a lock for the women's tournament. I think they're projected
and they had
as
a good year,
7 seed this year. So I don't know if they can make a run, but I do think they are more secure in the tournament than the men's team are.
Sure, certainly.
So that's also another positive.
Yeah, the women finished fourth in the Big Ten, and the three teams ahead of them were all like nationally ranked. Iowa, Ohio State. I don't remember who the third Big Ten women's team that was ranked, but like they finished right behind those teams. A really good first season for new head coach Robin. I'm going to butcher her last name. Freilich. Thank you. So again, just trying to end the show here a little bit on some positive notes. As Jason said, the women's team is a way more enjoyable watch. I understand that. Certainly a lot less frustration there. But like one more point about spring football, just looking forward to seeing and getting a little bit more of a glimpse of what this new regime will look like going forward. Might get access to parts of practice. We'll see. It's the new staff, so you never know how they're going to handle things like that. But we will get some interviews with coaches. It was nice I was over in East Lansing last week when defensive coordinator Joe Rossi and offensive coordinator Brian Lindgren spoke to the media. It was nice to interact with them and get and meet them for the first time. Got some insight in just how they where their mindset is heading into the season. So that was cool. looking forward to that. But I was going to say, I do hope that we're talking about Michigan State men's team into March here. Like an early exit is not good for them. It's not good for the fans. It's not good for us as people who are covering the team. So like, I would love to be able to continue to talk about this men's team going deeper into March. But they're going to have to correct a lot of things here going into tournament play. With that, any final thoughts, Aiden, before we kind of close things down?
No, I mean, I think Ohio State is definitely their biggest game to date for this season. And I think it's not a win and they're in situation. But I do think, if they lose, that's really going to hurt them a lot. And I think if they win, that gives them another chance against Purdue again, another team that they can redeem themselves against. So, it's not a redemption. Don't call it a redemption tour, but it is an opportunity to kind of get back at, 2 games that they really, had an opportunity to win.
For sure. As always, you can find all of our content at our website, www.si.com/college/Michigan State. That's where we, post all of our articles. Those are free of charge. So check out all of our content there. Follow us on Facebook, at Spartan Nation. If you're watching on Facebook, we appreciate that. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button for us. Would love to, have you join our little club here. We're just over, I want to say like 650 or so. So we would love to, boost those numbers a little bit going forward. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you next time.